I remember the exact moment the first crack showed up. It was a Friday evening, nothing unusual on the surface. I'd just come home from work, traffic was bad, my back hurt, and all I could think about was collapsing on the couch. The kitchen lights were on. I could hear her moving around, humming something soft and tuneless. It was one of those scenes that used to feel like comfort. Familiar. Safe. But that day, something was off. Maybe it was the silence between the sounds, the kind that doesn't belong in a home where two people still love each other. Or maybe it was instinct, some primal, unspoken alarm that had been trying to get my attention for weeks. Her purse was on the kitchen chair. Open. Not wide open, just unzipped enough to reveal the corner of a velvet box. I wouldn't say I was snooping. Not really. But I'm also not going to pretend I didn't look. Something about it caught my eye, the packaging, the kind of thing you don't buy at a department store. It looked expensive. Personal. Special. I leaned down and opened it a little more, just enough to see inside. A gold pendant nestled in satin. Delicate. Tasteful. And without question, not from me. She turned around right then. Our eyes met. My hand was still near the bag. I didn't speak. Just pointed. She didn't freeze. Didn't look guilty or scared. She just walked over, took the box out like she'd been expecting this moment, and gave me a smirk that didn't match the situation. It's from a colleague, she said casually, like she was explaining a coffee mug. We just wrapped up a big project together. He said it was a thank you. Honestly, I may have hinted at it. I've wanted one like this for a while. That line stuck in my head like a splinter. She hates surprises. Always has. And she's not the type to hint at gifts. Certainly not from coworkers. And definitely not from male colleagues she insists she's not close to. I knew that much without needing to dig. We've been married for 6 years. You learn these things. You build your life around them. You trust them. I picked up the note that had fallen out of the box. A little card, thick cream paper, expensive lettering. I read it aloud without thinking. Gold suits you, just like the mornings next to you. She laughed too quickly. Oh my God, that she said, waving her hand like it was nothing. It's an inside joke with the team. We had this whole running gag about me showing up early and being grumpy before coffee. It's dumb. Don't overthink it. But I was already overthinking it. I had been for a while. There was no humor in the note. No inside joke that explained those words. Just like the mornings next to you doesn't come from a casual teammate. That's not banter. That's an asterisk Macy. That's the kind of sentence that knows what your skin smells like at 7 a.m. I watched her as she picked up the box and walked out of the kitchen like the conversation was over. Like my question was too silly to dignify. Her voice had that unnatural evenness, too smooth, too prepared. Like she'd rehearsed this. The scent she left behind wasn't hers. Not the perfume I'd bought her last Christmas. It was sweeter. Heavier. New. I stayed there alone, staring at the pendant box. Boutique packaging. No receipt inside. No tag. Whoever bought it knew what they were doing and who they were buying it for. I didn't say anything that night. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't know what to do with what I believed. I stood at the sink, the water running without purpose, just listening to the echoes in my head. I tried to talk myself down. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it really was a team joke and I was the one seeing monsters in the dark. But I couldn't ignore the way she hadn't flinched. The way she'd smiled. Like I was a child making a mess out of nothing. And I couldn't forget the note. The handwriting. The elegance of it. No one writes something like that for a joke. That card had been written for her. And whoever wrote it had known exactly what it would feel like pressed up against her skin. That night I went to bed early. She came in an hour later, slipped under the sheets without a word. I kept my back turned and listened to her breathing. Slow. Steady. As if nothing had happened. But for me, something had. A door had opened. Just a crack. Just enough to let in the doubt. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling like it might somehow spell out the truth I didn't want to face. The note kept replaying in my head. That one line, just like the mornings next to you, cut deeper than it had any right to. It wasn't the pendant or the perfume that got me. It was that sentence. Because I knew the mornings she spent with me and they never sounded like poetry. They sounded like coffee brewing, her flipping through her phone, and me trying not to be late to work. That note wasn't about me. I moved to the guest room around 2 a.m., told myself it was to clear my head. But the truth was I couldn't lie next to her. Not with that scent still clinging to her. Not with that smile still burned into my memory. In the quiet of that room, surrounded by the books and old travel photos we never got around to hanging, the memories started rolling in, each one sharper than the last. It wasn't just the pendant. It had been building. For months. Maybe longer. I remembered the first time she told me she'd be late at work for a strategy meeting. That was back in February. She came home at 10 p.m., said the client presentation ran long. She looked tired, worn down, but she also looked different, flushed, like she'd been running. Her makeup had faded in a way that didn't match sitting at a desk. I had asked if everything was okay. She had kissed me on the forehead and said, "Just exhausted, babe." Then there was the yoga retreat she signed up for in March. Completely out of nowhere. She's not into yoga. Never has been. Hates the idea of sweating in a room full of strangers. But suddenly, she was waking up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays, claiming she needed time to realign her spirit. I'd laughed. Thought maybe she was just finding new ways to cope with stress. Now I realize I didn't know what she was aligning herself with, or who. The weekend cooking class was the next red flag. She showed me a flyer and said she was going with a few people from work. I'd asked to join, joking that I might finally learn how to make something besides pasta. She had paused, then said it was already full. Her tone was sweet, but final. That was when I felt the first real sting. Like I was being gently pushed to the outside of her life. She came home with bags of ingredients that night, made a dish I'd never seen her attempt before, some fusion thing with lemongrass and saffron, and claimed it had been her experiment. I watched her take the first bite with the satisfied little smile that didn't look like pride. It looked like a memory she wasn't sharing. Then there were the texts. She used to be careless with her phone. It would be on the counter on the couch, buzzing freely. But lately, every time it vibrated, she'd grab it like it was radioactive. Once I came into the room and saw her screen light up. She tilted it away from me so quickly you'd think I was trying to steal secrets. When I asked, she said she was part of a private group chat for work, a venting space, she called it. Said it was confidential. There was another night, late April, when we were driving to her office so I could drop her off for an early meeting. She asked me to pull over 2 blocks before the building. I laughed and asked if I was embarrassing her. She smiled and said no, that she just wanted to grab a coffee on the way and get a walk-in before sitting down for 8 hours. I watched in the rearview mirror as she walked not toward the cafe, not toward her office, but into a side street. A small alley lined with old buildings. I waited for her to reappear on the other end. She didn't. I told myself she must have taken a detour. I drove off and never brought it up. But the worst memory? That came one night when we were sitting on the couch, her head in my lap, scrolling through her phone. She was telling me about some funny comment her coworker made, laughing softly to herself. Then she said a name. Not mine. She caught herself, immediately froze, and then laughed it off. I was just texting with him about that joke. His name got stuck in my head. I remember nodding, pretending I hadn't noticed. But I did. And I haven't forgotten. The thing is, I wanted to believe her. That's what made it worse. I wanted to believe all the late nights and strange classes and cryptic texts were just coincidences. I wanted to trust that I wasn't watching my marriage unravel in slow motion. But now, sitting in this dark guest room, surrounded by pieces of a life we built together, I saw the truth for what it was. A slow erosion of honesty in * Macy and us. All those memories I had chalked up to stress, to coincidence, to personal growth, they weren't innocent. They were symptoms. Signs. And I had ignored every one of them. I thought back to a time maybe a year ago when she'd asked me what I feared most in a relationship. I had said boredom. Stagnation. I thought she'd agreed. But maybe what she feared was something else entirely, being unseen. Or maybe she just got tired of the version of us that had become routine. But even if she drifted, even if she felt lost, there were still lines you don't cross. There are still vows. And now, looking at all those moments through a new lens, I saw them for what they really were, red flags. One after the other. Each one waving harder than the last, and I just stood there pretending it was the wind. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of what she was doing, but because I was finally awake to what she already had. I never wanted to become the guy who checks on his wife like some amateur detective. The kind who scrolls through phone records or tails someone through the city. But you get pushed far enough. Backed into a corner by weeks of confusion, lies, and gut instinct. And that line you swore you'd never cross? It starts to blur. It was a Sunday morning. Overcast. Quiet. She was in the bedroom tying her sneakers. Dressed in one of those matching workout sets she'd suddenly started collecting. She told me she had a fitness session downtown. A pop-up Pilates thing with some friends from work. Said I didn't need to drop her off. She was taking her car. She kissed me on the cheek like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Not to me. She left. And 15 minutes later, I followed. I felt sick doing it. like something in me was dying as I turned on the ignition and rolled out behind her. It was as if the marriage I believed in was sitting in the back seat, watching me destroy whatever dignity we had left. But the truth? It had already been destroyed. I just needed to see how deep the wreckage went. She didn't drive toward the fitness center. Didn't even take the main road that would have gotten her close. Instead, she veered west, toward an older part of town we rarely visited. A quiet neighborhood with brick sidewalks and tiny inns that catered to tourists and romantic getaways. And there it was, a small hotel. The Greenbrier. I'd know it anywhere. We'd stayed there once, for our 4th anniversary. It had these antique doorknobs and clawfoot tubs. Place for lovers. Not spreadsheets or team retreats. I parked on the far side of the street, just behind a construction van. My hands were trembling. She got out of the car, glanced around like someone who'd watched too many spy movies. In her hand was a sports bag, supposedly packed with workout clothes. But I recognized the lace peeking through the zipper. Lingerie, a set I'd seen in her browser history months ago but never in our bedroom. Then the door opened from inside. And there he was, mid-30s, gray sweatshirt, taller than me, smiling like he belonged there. Like this wasn't his first time opening that door for her. She stepped into his arms like she was arriving home. Not awkward, not shy, like routine. His hand landed on her waist as naturally as if it had always belonged there. She didn't pull away, didn't flinch. She leaned in. She smiled. Not the tight, forced smile she gave me when she was annoyed or trying to hide something. This was soft, warm, mate. The kind of smile you reserve for someone who makes you feel like the world disappears when they walk into the room. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I just took the photo. 1sh*T. Clear. Zoomed. Her with him. The name of the hotel sign visible in the background. The timestamp on the image stared back at me like a judge with a verdict. I didn't need more. I already had too much. I drove back home without music. Without thought. The city passed by in a blur. Buildings, stoplights, strangers on sidewalks who would never know what today meant for me. I sat in our driveway for a full 10 minutes before walking inside. When she returned hours later, her hair was slightly damp, her cheeks glowing. She stretched dramatically and said, "That was intense. I feel it in muscles I forgot I had." I just nodded, said nothing, not even a twitch. Just watched her walk past me, humming to herself. That night, I laid next to her in bed and pretended to sleep while she typed away on her phone. Probably texting him, maybe thanking him for the day, maybe planning the next one. I didn't look. I didn't need to. Everything I had suspected was true. Every late night, every strange excuse, every vague explanation. It all led to this. The truth was no longer hidden, and it was brutal. Not because of the cheating, not even entirely because of the lies, but because she had become someone I didn't recognize. A stranger with my last name. Someone who could share a bed with me while building a life with someone else. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the soft sounds of her breathing, trying to remember the last time I heard that sound and felt at peace. Couldn't. There was a time I would have done anything to protect what we had. I'd fought for us during rough patches, gone to therapy, changed schedules, even swallowed pride. But now I realized I had been the only one fighting. And the war was long over. She just forgot to tell me she'd surrendered. In the morning, I woke up before her and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. The sunlight caught her hair just right, the way it used to on lazy Sundays. But it wasn't romantic anymore. It was haunting, like watching a beautiful painting knowing the canvas underneath was rotting. I thought about confronting her right then, slamming the photo down on the table, demanding the truth. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready to hear her lie to me again. I needed time. I needed space. And more than anything, I needed to decide who I was going to be from this moment forward. Because the man I had been, the one who trusted without question, who believed in forever, he was gone. And all that was left was someone standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump or to walk away. I didn't confront her. Not that day. Not the next. Not even the one after that. I didn't scream, I didn't accuse, and I didn't cry. Instead, I changed the rules of the game. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, slow and methodical, breaking you down piece by piece until one morning you wake up and realize the life you're living doesn't belong to you anymore. That's where I was. And I knew if I wanted any chance at walking away whole, I had to start playing smart. I began by disappearing in the ways that were easiest to miss. First, the digital life we shared gone. I canceled our shared Spotify account. The playlist we built over 6 years, the one we danced to in the kitchen during holidays? Deleted. She didn't even mention it. I unsubscribed from our joint grocery delivery, the one we'd set up together after laughing in the produce aisle about never buying enough onions. She texted me about it once. Did we cancel the green box thing? I replied, yeah. Didn't seem worth it anymore. She didn't follow up. Next, I pulled our calendars apart. No more synced schedules. No more reminders about dentist appointments or dinner reservations popping up on both our phones. The vacation plans for late summer Chicago, then a cabin by the lake, quietly vanished from the shared drive. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and pretended not to. Pretending was something she'd grown quite good at. She started trying harder, oddly. Wore lipstick while making coffee. Played jazz in the living room on Sunday mornings like we used to. She even suggested we watch a movie together, one of those old comfort films we used to quote in sync. I told her I had work to finish and stayed in the guest room. Her smile faltered, but she didn't press. Maybe she thought I was just tired. Maybe she didn't care enough to ask. I responded to her texts in short, polite bursts, just enough to maintain the illusion. No warmth. No emojis. Just dry, factual sentences. Yes. Be home at 7. Got it. She once texted, miss you today, and I replied, busy. I could tell the silence unnerved her. She started staying home more, as if trying to reverse whatever thread had started to unwind. She left little notes in my books again, old habit of hers. You left off here. This line reminded me of you. I didn't acknowledge them, but I read every one. Each note landed like a pebble in an empty well. Loud, pointless. And then came the envelope. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't shove it into her hands or leave it in the middle of the kitchen table. I waited until she was at work and tucked it into her makeup bag, nestled between her concealer and mascara, where she'd be sure to find it, but only when alone. Inside was the photo. One single image. No words. No accusation. Just a quiet mirror held up to everything she was pretending not to be. She found it the next morning. I know because I heard the bathroom drawer slam shut. She didn't mention it at breakfast. Just poured her coffee, hands trembling slightly, and asked if I wanted eggs. I said I wasn't hungry. She nodded and didn't look at me again. That same afternoon I packed a bag and left. No note. No warning. Phone off. I drove 2 hours to my parents' old place in the countryside. An empty house now, dusty, untouched, but familiar in a way nothing else in my life was anymore. I sat on the porch with a beer, staring at the trees and waiting for the ache in my chest to dull. It didn't. But at least out there, the silence was honest. She called. 6 times. Left 2 voicemails. One of them was just breathing. The messages stopped after day 2. When I returned home on the 3rd evening, the house was spotless. She had cleaned like her life depended on it. Candles lit. Music playing. One of my sweaters neatly folded on the bed. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were ringed with red and her voice cracked when she asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. She waited for more, but I didn't give it to her. That was the beginning of something neither of us could name. She stopped bringing up dinner plans. I stopped pretending to care about the headlines she read aloud from her phone. We existed in the same space, orbiting around each other like 2 satellites with broken signals. It was a dance now. A silent one. She moved with caution, unsure of my rhythm. I moved with detachment, unsure if she noticed. She started watching me closely, like she was waiting for the explosion. But I wasn't going to give her that. I wasn't going to let her write me off as the angry husband. That's too easy. I wanted her to sit with the silence. With the consequence. I wanted her to feel every moment she had once taken for granted now slipping away like sand through her fingers. And she did. It was in the way she lingered in doorways, hoping I'd look up. The way she over-explained her texts, her schedule, her whereabouts, as if she could undo the damage with transparency that came far too late. It was in the way she touched my arm once, lightly, like a question, and I didn't flinch, but I didn't touch her back either. She stopped sleeping in our bed on the 5th night. I didn't ask why. She moved to the guest room and left the door open, as if inviting conversation. I closed mine. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't cruelty. This was me choosing clarity over chaos. For too long, I'd played the role of the forgiving partner. The one who soothed, who steadied. Now, I was giving her the same silence she once gave me, the same silence I had begged her to fill with truth. But the truth had already spoken. Loud enough for both of us to hear. And now it was her turn to sit in it. When I came back from the countryside, something had shifted. Not just in me, but in her. I don't know if it was the photo, the silence, or the days without contact, but whatever mask she'd been wearing had slipped. The version of her that greeted me at the door wasn't composed or defensive. She looked wrecked. She didn't say a word when I walked in. Just watched me quietly, like she wasn't sure if she should run toward me or brace for impact. Her eyes were swollen, makeup faintly smudged under the lower lids. She was still wearing the sweatshirt she used to steal from my drawer, the one I hadn't seen her touch in months. I passed her without speaking. Set my bag down by the hallway bench, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen. I didn't slam anything. Didn't sigh. I just poured a glass of water and stood there, staring out the window at the backyard we hadn't touched since spring. Behind me, I heard her walk in. Her footsteps were hesitant, like the floor might crack if she moved too quickly. "I didn't know if you'd come back," she said finally. Her voice was soft, stretched thin by hours of crying. I didn't respond. She waited, then added, I saw the picture. I didn't know what to say. I still didn't look at her. I didn't trust myself to. Because if I met her eyes, I might say all the wrong things, or worse, I might start to feel something I didn't want to feel. Pity. Grief. Remorse for a person I no longer recognized. "I made a mistake," she continued. "I know that. And I'm not going to make excuses. I just want to fix it. Fix it. Like we were dealing with a leaky faucet or a broken fence." She started talking more after that. Rambling almost. Said she was confused. Said it didn't mean anything. Said she had ended it. I listened. But I didn't engage. I couldn't. My silence wasn't a punishment, it was a boundary. One I should have said a long time ago. That night, I slept in our bed. She didn't. I don't know if it was by choice or if she just understood something had changed permanently. Around midnight, I heard the guest room door creak open. Light footsteps down the hallway. The sound of the bathroom door clicking shut. Then nothing. But I knew she was crying. The kind of crying people do when they're trying not to be heard. Quiet, clenched sobs into a towel. I stared at the ceiling and let it happen. Because she needed to feel it. Not just regret. Not just guilt. But the full weight of consequence. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Made coffee. Read the news. She came down wearing the same sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a messy knot. She looked at me like she was afraid to speak. I nodded at the second mug. "There's some left," I said. She took it with both hands. Whispered thanks. We didn't say anything else. The silence wasn't hostile, it was something colder. Something heavier. Like we were strangers sharing a kitchen after a storm passed through a house we no longer claimed. Over the next few days, she tried to pretend we still had routines. She cooked my favorite pasta. Played the record we used to dance to. Left a note on the fridge that said, "Missed you today." She wore perfume again, subtle, familiar. Not the sweet one. The one I actually liked. But I didn't comment. She started sitting closer on the couch. Her hand would rest on the cushion between us, not quite touching mine. Once, she reached out, barely grazing my fingers. I didn't pull away. But I didn't move toward her either. She retracted her hand a second later and stared at the TV like nothing had happened. At night, she sometimes lingered outside the bedroom door. I could see her shadow underneath, pacing softly. Then she'd walk away. I started coming home later. Not to avoid her, just to breathe. I'd park 2 blocks down and walk slowly, letting the cold air settle around me. I'd never realized how much tension lived in my chest until I had space to exhale. She noticed. She didn't say anything, but I could see it in the way her eyes searched mine every time I came in late. Like she wanted to ask where I'd been but didn't feel entitled anymore. That was the thing, she had lost her position. Whatever title she thought she held in my life, it had been revoked. Not through vengeance. Through vacancy. She was still trying in quiet ways. Left books by my nightstand that she thought I'd like. Reorganized the spice cabinet because she knew it irritated me. Replaced my toothbrush without asking. But none of it mattered. Because she had done the one thing we couldn't undo. It wasn't the S***X. It wasn't the secrecy. It was something simpler and more devastating. She watched me start to disappear and didn't stop me. And now she was trying to climb back into a house that no longer stood. One afternoon, I caught her sitting on the closet floor with a box of old letters. My letters. The ones I used to write her when we first moved in. I watched her from the hallway unseen. She was crying, holding one to her chest like it might still mean something. For a second I felt it, that pull. That ache to kneel beside her and say something kind. But I didn't move. Because I couldn't give her that. Not now. She had released me. Not with a goodbye. Not with a fight. But with neglect. With 1,000 small exits before the big one. She thought I was still inside this relationship, still holding on. But I had left weeks ago. I was just a shadow moving through rooms waiting for her to notice. And when she finally did, it was too late. It wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. I didn't want to destroy her, I wanted clarity. A kind of justice, maybe? The truth deserved more than quiet suffering. It deserved air. I called my sister. She was the only person who knew everything. We talked for hours. She listened without interrupting, then said something that stuck: you can't heal in the same house that hurt you. That week, she posted a story on a popular relationships forum. Anonymous, of course. It was about her brother and a wife who lost her compass. No names. No locations. Just the raw timeline. A man gives his everything. The wife steps out. The husband vanishes emotionally, quietly. Then the photo. Then the silence. It was brutally honest. And it spread like wildfire. People shared it. Commented. Thousands of them. Some angry, some heartbroken, some reliving their own betrayals. A few sharp-eyed readers even pieced together who the man in the photo was. I hadn't asked for that part, but once it happened, there was no undoing it. The next day, her social media went dark. Then she showed up at my office. The receptionist buzzed me. Said my wife was downstairs and looked upset. I didn't go down. I sat at my desk and stared out the window while my phone vibrated with messages I didn't open. Later, she sent one that simply read, "You won. I'm alone." I didn't reply. A few days later, I ended it with him. It's over. Still, I said nothing. Because I knew she still thought this was about the affair. Like ending it with him would somehow fix us. But she never understood that the real betrayal wasn't just physical. It was watching me fade and doing nothing. Letting me disappear without reaching out. She hadn't lost me. She let me go. The divorce papers arrived a week later. No long note. No drawn-out plea. Just her signature. Emily Jensen, her maiden name. I signed them the same day. I didn't leave a return address. Just dropped the envelope in the mailbox and walked away. It was the quietest ending I could imagine for something that had once meant everything. I found a small apartment on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy. Just enough space to breathe. The kind of place where the floor creaks and the heat takes a minute to kick in. But it was mine. And that meant something. I started painting again. Not well. Not even for anyone else. Just color on canvas. No expectations. One afternoon at a used bookstore, I met someone. Julia. She caught me arranging books by color, one of my weird habits, and smiled like it made perfect sense. We talked. About books. Art. Regret. I told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. She said something I still think about: you're not broken. You're rebuilt. I don't know if we're anything yet. But that line? That line stuck. A few weeks later, I went back to the lake where Emily and I had spent one of our anniversaries. I didn't bring a fishing rod this time. Just a canvas. I painted the lake. Still. Quiet. At the edge of the water, I painted a single figure, solitary but upright. Peaceful. I left the painting on a bench. Taped a note to the back: who you used to be is not a prison. You can walk out anytime. I didn't need her forgiveness anymore. Because I had already forgiven myself.